They are young.
These are kids who are here, they've been traumatized, they're hurting.
Alone.
I cannot believe this. I can't.
And unwanted in Florida.
We want those resources focused on Florida kids and American kids.
Unaccompanied migrant children and the people who care for them.
We're cut in the middle the same way that the children are cut in the middle.
Are facing an uncertain future.
We feel in limbo.
With unprecedented new policies.
For a while we were wondering, are they really going to act on it?
Forcing children out.
The only word that I can say is it's heartbreaking.
We were the first to tell you their stories.
So they had to move out right away?
Right away.
Go in depth on all sides.
Your taxpayer dollars have now become a travel agency to help them with illegal immigration programs.
And ask our most powerful leader.
Are you not going to renew any of these licenses? Governor,
why?
Why are you bringing kids into this immigration debate?
We don't want Florida to be the place where they bring people in the middle of the night.
Our 5-month investigation.
This is one of my worst fears.
It is wrong on a human level.
And we're not done.
So you're the governor who turns his back on kids?
This is Florida Investigates, Unaccompanied and Unwanted.
We're here to talk about this national story the Florida Investigates team was first to break. At its center is it's all about children being caught in the middle of this fight against illegal immigration. And for a period of time, we were the only news team in Florida, even the country, that number one, knew what was going on and was reporting it. So this started with a tip from a personal friend about children being removed from a shelter all of a sudden.
I was at dinner with some friends of mine, and one of the friends works for this Lutheran organization, and she said the problem is our license is up and the state won't say one way or another if they're going to relicense them, and if they don't get their license, the children have to be moved out of state, basically.
She's talking about this shelter, known as the Dream Center. It opened after a request by the Trump administration. Funded by the feds, it's operated by Lutheran Services of Florida.
All of a sudden, the state's child welfare agency, which licenses these shelters, stopped licensing them. And they weren't even telling the shelters why.
And when she started telling me, I just went through the roof and said, this cannot happen to children.
These are unaccompanied minors. They are children who have made it over the border without their parents. And legally, the country is obligated to take care of them before they're reunited with family here. They're here as part of this federally funded program. There are no state dollars that are being impacted by this. And the tip just came in as, hey, there's all these kids that are being pushed out of this shelter.
And I thought, this is horrible. You know, these are small children that have been uprooted. They're away from their family. They have a nice safe haven now. And our state is basically going to destabilize them, make them be uprooted again before they can get back with their families. I said, that's an atrocity. I said, I don't know what I can do about it, but I know someone that can look into it. And that's when I said, I'm contacting Katie LaGrone because she'll investigate this.
And so when I got this tip, once I knew that children were involved, and these are young children, I was like, we got to pursue it. This story impacts the people who take care of these children, nonprofits who are just carrying out their mission to provide shelter and take care of families and children in need. This impacts foster parents who have stepped up the plate to also take care of these children. For these shelter providers, so many of them nonprofits, faith-based, there's nothing political about this. This is just simply them carrying out their mission to love thy neighbor and to take care of families and children in need. And so for them, they're as much caught in the middle as these children.
We are the last hope for these kids. If they don't have us, forget about it.
He's a foster parent who's cared for roughly 250 unaccompanied children over the past 7 years. This is till last September. He and his wife had been waiting for Florida's Department of Children and Families to renew their license, but he says the agency wouldn't tell them a thing. Their license lapsed, forcing them to suddenly say goodbye to a teenage brother and sister they'd been caring for.
What was it like saying goodbye?
Heartbreaking. I couldn't believe it. I came in and cried.
It was horrible. Horrible because we have a center prepared to receive our children. We have staff that is passionate about serving the children. And there we are in the center with no children.
More recently, we spoke with Joanne Ortiz, who recruits foster families for Bethany Christian Services in Orlando. For months, the nonprofit has also been unable to accept any new children.
We believe to love God and to serve our neighbors. And we live by that rule. We are very concerned about the safety of the children.
It's not a political issue for us. It's an issue of humanity. It's an issue of compassion.
Pastor Joel Tooley leads a church in Melbourne. He's also a longtime immigration advocate. And in January, he led the charge behind a letter signed by hundreds of faith-based leaders from around the state. The letter asked the governor to lift an executive order targeting migrant children.
We have a responsibility to care for these kids, no matter how they come, no matter what their background is.
And the impact here is far-reaching. According to the Department of Children and Families, there are currently 17 shelters and 5 foster agencies in Florida that are federally contracted to care for unaccompanied minors. In 2021, 60 foster families in Florida also stepped up. Altogether, shelters and foster care agencies serve nearly 4,300 unaccompanied children in 2021 alone.
So there have been a lot of twists and turns in this story since you started working on it.
So right now we're trying to peel back the curtain on our reporting on this topic. There is still so much unknown about the future of these shelters and of course these children and Florida's willingness to open its doors to these children from other countries. We just don't know what's going to happen next.
Here's where our reporting has taken us so far. It all started back in September at this press conference in Fort Myers. Governor DeSantis announced a new executive order cracking down on illegal immigration into the state. Dubbed Biden's border crisis, it directed every state agency to stop helping the feds bring undocumented immigrants here, including children. Florida's Department of Children and Families ordered to stop licensing any shelters housing unaccompanied kids.
We have immigration laws for a reason, and to just throw them by the wayside for this is really unacceptable.
2 months later, we got the tip. A shelter in Sarasota had just been forced to relocate all the children in its care, nearly 60 of them, because DCF refused to grant them a new state license.
I've never experienced this before, so I don't really understand.
They sued and got their license back. Then came the next hit, this time from DCF itself. Just before Christmas, the state's own child welfare agency proposed a new rule, limiting these shelters from accepting children and getting relicensed until the feds agree to share more details with Florida about who they're sending here.
This is not just anti-immigrant, this is anti-kid.
We have a responsibility to care for these kids, no matter how they come.
In January, Republican lawmakers introduced legislation to penalize the transportation companies who are contracted to send these kids here.
If they are an illegal citizen, no matter how old they are, if common carriers are participating in this practice, then yes, that common carrier would then be prohibited should this bill pass.
That includes airplanes, buses, any company contracted by the federal government to transport immigrants into the state.
I am the daughter of Nicaraguan immigrants who fled from the terrors of war.
Do not prevent shelters from housing unaccompanied minors.
All children deserve to be loved and safe.
This bill makes no sense.
This bill really is an attempt to respond to the damaging repercussions of the Biden administration's unlawful pursuit of an open border policy.
This month, lawmakers passed that legislation.
77 yeas, 42 nays, Mr. Speaker.
Show the bill passes. Read the next bill.
If the governor signs it, it will become the first state law of its kind in the nation.
They haven't drilled anything on those leases that we've given them.
It's a high-stakes situation. Are all these shelters taking kids? We understand that some aren't because of this order. Still seems like such a mess.
So where are we going today?
So this morning we're headed to Lutheran Services of Florida. to speak to the CEO. We haven't spoken to him in 4 months. The story started with them. They spoke to us that one day once all the kids had to leave the shelter, and they haven't spoken to us since.
Major developments.
Recent move by the governor forcing children out.
60 unaccompanied children.
These are real people's lives at stake. Anytime you sit down with press, it's a little nerve-wracking.
So it's been a while.
We were trying to work things out, and we sort of did for the short run.
Where do things stand right now with the Dream Center?
Our license has been issued, our renewal has been issued. We have kids in the center. We feel a little bit in limbo. It's really more worry about the future, what happens in the future.
How do you describe this whole situation?
This whole thing has been certainly disheartening, but confusing too. I mean, it seems like a lot of this is an attempt at solving a problem that doesn't really exist.
How long were kids out of the shelter?
Probably more than a month. It was a very sudden thing. We didn't get any warning that we weren't going to get our license renewed. We just all of a sudden kept waiting and waiting and waiting and made phone calls and didn't get answers. And then finally we found ourselves without a license. And the day before that, we had to relocate all the kids. I felt like we really let them down. So yeah, that was sad.
Can you explain now, sort of looking back at, was that the most intense time?
It was concern, confusion, lack of understanding what was going on, a lot of frantic work that we had to do to inflict the least amount of trauma on kids as we possibly could, and then the period of time with a lawsuit and waiting to see what was going to happen.
Was that a tough decision to say we're going to sue DCF?
Of course, we value our relationship with them, but I think in a situation like that, when clearly things weren't being done the way that they're supposed to be done. There were no rules, there were no laws that would have prohibited us from being licensed and not having had that disruption in the kids' lives. And we needed clarity. That was the only way we could get it.
Do you think that this is going to be resolved?
Yeah. You do? It'll be resolved somehow. I do know that if a year passes and things haven't been resolved, then we'll be out of business. When our renewal comes up, we're not going to be able to meet the criteria that have been outlined in the rule, because no one can meet those criteria.
So what would happen to the Dream Center?
We would probably close it down.
Last time we spoke, I asked you if you felt like this was a politically driven situation, and you didn't want to go there. What's your take on that now? Is this political? It's
not a political issue for me, and it's not a political issue for us. It's way deeper than politics for us. I know that these kids, I've spent time with these kids. They're incredibly grateful kids. They're grateful to have the opportunity to be in our shelters. They're grateful at the possibility of being reunited with family members here in the United States. You know, the kids certainly are caught in the middle right now between some kind of battle between the federal government and state government, and we stand with the kids. So that puts us in the middle too.
These are shelters that are federally funded.
Coming up next, pushing for answers from the very top. What happened when we pressed Governor DeSantis on policies that would keep migrant children out of Florida?